I always tell people that the startup stuff, especially working with small business owners, this shit's hard. It's not worth it for like hope and a whim that you make a bunch of money at the end of it. If you don't enjoy it and you don't understand and appreciate the uniqueness of the opportunity you have every day, just work somewhere for 40 years, get the gold watch and be a company person. You know, if that's your outcome of just like stability and a long-term gain of some sort, that's where I think the guiding principles, the culture, the product, the getting deep with our relationship with customers, all of that is a monetary benefit to the business. They are strong, sound business decisions. They also make the pain and suffering more palatable. And I think that's the other thing I tell our team. I tell, first-time founders, how have we done that? And a lot of it is the mix of the guiding principles and the mix of being able to endure immense suffering and pain.
All right, Alex, welcome to Tech Scenes Unplugged.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to chat.
I've been waiting for this conversation. We've had a couple conversations prior to this, but I'm excited to have you on the show. So let's start from the top for people that don't know. Tell me about Sense.
Yeah, Sense is, well, but by the way, thank you again for having me, and equally excited, and appreciate you sending me your book, Peak Teams, and just, excited to read that and chat with you further. But, the background of Sense and myself and our team, it's the classic kind of vertical SaaS play that you're probably familiar with in other industries with the Toast of the Worlds, the Gloss Genius, the Mind Bodies, et cetera. But we focus really in the garment care space. And I'm sure we'll get into a little bit more of why the hell I'm so excited and passionate about one of the weirdest niches out there. But our mission and our goal is to power laundry day in America through the local SMB by really empowering that small business owner, call it a laundromat, dry cleaner, et cetera. But we really focused on laundromats out of the gate to grow, manage, and understand their business through centralized technology that is approachable for their attendants in the store, modernized and accessible for their and easy to use for their end customers, while giving that operator, that business owner, a command center, a centralized place where they can run all the different aspects of their business, opposed to kind of Frankensteining their operations that they historically had to do based on a lack of access to really sophisticated technological infrastructure. So that's a little bit of high level, and excited to dive in deeper.
What did it look like prior to Sense for like a laundromat or a laundry operator? And what's it look like now?
100%. I think a lot of it is any startup, right? Before you get Salesforce and tech tools and this and that, how the hell do you run it? It's on spreadsheets, it's on pieces of paper, it's on word of mouth, it's on email and Slack, et cetera. I think one of the things that this industry, particularly the operators, don't get enough credit for is their caliber and sophistication, because when there is a lack of infrastructure and technology and tool sets, et cetera, the ability for operators to still run great businesses was there. And that's not because of anything other than their grit and their ability to put themselves into the business and operate it. So it was a lot of pen and paper. A lot of operators were told, in the garment care space, you have a bunch of different revenue streams. You have the self-serve, people that are doing laundry at a laundromat themselves, putting coins into a machine. So you've got coin revenue and different ways of trying to track your self-serve business, utility bills and security cameras and weighing coin boxes to track your revenue. Then you have the over-the-counter sales, so wash and fold, dry cleaning, product sales, et cetera. And a lot of that was a horizontal solution called Square, Clover, pen and paper with a credit card payment processor, or just cash only. And so that was, totally separate from the self-serve business and not really effective tracking there. Pickup and delivery could be, MapQuest and Google Forms and website forms and phone calls to take orders. Commercial laundry was old written invoices, QuickBooks invoices. Nothing spoke together. And we always said it wasn't that an SMB and a great operator couldn't run their business without technology. That would be ridiculous. And we never say we're going to transform your business and all that. We want to create optionality and centralization so you can take the caliber of how you operate your business to another level and have you stop working, in the business and start working on the business. And that's kind of a lot of the transition that we see when they're able to get access to data, to better management. They can own more stores with the same margin without hiring more labor and management and G&A, et cetera. So they can do more with less, scale faster and easier, within their market and beyond. And they can also start to launch new business models, new revenue lines that they previously thought impossible based on cost and difficulty, much faster and with greater ease when you have the technological system at your fingertips. So our goal was to digitize existing processes, bring those things online, because we don't need to change the way they're running their business. We just need to digitize it and enhance it. And then from there, as the business partner, as the technology partner to these operators, it's what more can we do? And that's the idea of building these long-term partnerships and being that partner, not just a vendor.
Right. It's that value add. And sometimes into SMB, that's kind of lost, I think.
I think people don't understand the value. I mean, when you're trying to grow a startup, grow a tech company, it's all about volume, location count, volume. And for a lot of these larger companies in more horizontal industries, not just laundry, not just restaurants, but you're going after all contractors, all home service professionals, any kind of restaurant, top, from the food truck to the high-end Michelin star, it's much more of a transactional sale. I think the value of niche verticals, it's more challenging. You got to build a lot more, specific product, but the relationships you build, the retention rate on your customers should be out of market, should be much, much higher. But that's due to the fact of, we get to build a much deeper relationship. We can have much greater ARPU expansion. We can offer more services, higher attachment rates to the new products we build because we know our customers. It's not we're calling 500 people a day, cycling through our leads and hoping they buy one piece of our software and then we move on. And we're not about selling one-time revenue products, hardware products, which this industry was really about from prior. It's about how deep can we build a relationship with our customer, and that is the greatest sign of success and health of a business, is the depth of the relationship you can have with your customers.
Right. When you look at really going deep with a customer, like how did you define like that beachhead, that starting point for the product? Right? Like how did you define what that was? And I mean, was it the most important thing they needed? Was it the easiest thing that you could build? Like what was the process?
It's so interesting because we launched the business coming out of COVID in 2021, and Wash and Fold, this kind of full service laundry element, was the fastest growing side of the industry. COVID wasn't a change agent. These habits were already going for consumers, but it was an accelerant of that behavior of, I don't want to be in a small high touch environment with a lot of metal and closed environment during COVID. I'll drop it off and the laundromat will do it for me, which is just an amazing service that so many people haven't experienced and don't even know about. But because that was the fastest growing side of the business, we launched with a point of sale. Now, point of sale is a very typical product line to launch in a new vertical because it's a high sell-through rate, low implementation cost, lower switching cost, and a core need that touches a lot of different sides of the business, right? You're taking in the order, the customer, the employee. By taking on the order, you're doing the processing of that order and tracking. And then you have, a kind of a product that's at the heartbeat of a location. It's inside a store, so you can expand within that location easier. So that was the first product we launched with based on what customers were telling us would be really valuable. I'd say in hindsight, that counter business and what's unique, at least about garment care, is the revenue breakdown by product is much different than in a restaurant. In a restaurant, take online ordering out of it. Every dollar that goes through that restaurant's going over the counter. There's no other way to pay. In a liquor store, in a grocery store, in a coffee shop, et cetera, again, take out online ordering and maybe commercial. In a laundromat, you have 2 to 3 different retail experiences inside of the same store. You have over the counter, you have vending machines, soap dispensers, et cetera. And then you have the self-serve side of the business where I'm doing the laundry myself. And at some stores, that could represent 90% of the revenue. And so our wedge product it was super important for us to get deep, but we were focusing on a particular ICP to understand the industry, build huge value in the operating side of the business. So a lot of companies come into an industry, they're focused on how are they touching every element of payment. That was our long-term goal. And that's what's developed a huge hardware business for us to kind of power these laundry equipment payment systems. But starting with the point of sale was much more about how do we create the operating system? And the over-the-counter product was the fastest way for us to start to build a nucleus before we invest more in these other kind of payment-driven products. So you could say, would it have been more valuable for us to start hardware, from a need perspective for our customers? Maybe. But we felt like that strategy of focusing on the operating system would be better for us in the long haul.
Right. What was the reality of the product roadmap at that time? Like, how far out did you see what you wanted to build?
I think this is part of the genius of my co-founder and our chief product officer, where he and I we were building the business during COVID and up till 2 a.m. with a gin and tonic, figuring out how do we build this thing for the long haul and see around corners. It's the genius, but also not to take any credit away from us. I think SMB tech, from a roadmap perspective, is very linear. And it's all about listening to the customer and understanding their needs. And so we can think 10 years out because we have a very clear view just from both of us going to laundromats on the weekends. We've been to more stores than I hope to God anybody has, and have talked to more operators, more attendants, sent our laundry out to more different businesses to understand what it means to be an operator. And that is so core to how we operate our business. It's kind of that understanding of one of our guiding principles, act like an owner. That's just not a shareholder of sense, but act like an owner as in the customer who we're selling to.
Right.
And so, I look at our business today, 4 years from when we started it, and it's exactly how we expected it to be. And that's not, I don't say that in arrogance or in any even naive way. I think it's because if you focus on the fundamentals, what you need to build in order to make a business owner's life better. It's the bigger problem is not what's the roadmap. It's how do you prioritize along the way? Because when you talk to 10 operators who run their business 100 different ways, you got to not just say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and you can't play to your biggest operators only. That is the balance, I think, is the genius of product, to satiate a customer who is unhappy because they want more, but also get somebody excited who's not ready to join and not ready to adopt because we don't have the features, while also we have customers that love the system and are happy and just want us to go in one direction. So I think the product roadmap was pretty set, I think, at a theoretical level when we started the business. I look at our P&L, our product line, all of these things is what we wanted to do.
But it was really about threading the needle with priorities.
Exactly.
Of balancing those stakeholders.
And that's the roller coaster ride. Are we making the right decision now? Did we move too quickly here, which set us up for failure here? So we got to bounce back and do that. And then it's always shifting. And nothing is then linear. So that's kind of more of how I think we've struggled, but also looked at it.
Yeah, I love thinking about it as like a journey, and in the book I talk about different peaks that you go through. And at every stage of the business, you're at a different elevation. You have a different view of what you've done, what you've seen, what's worked, what's not worked. I think product, it's interesting because it's probably the functional area in a lot of tech businesses. They're all product businesses, but sometimes it's the least mature element. People have figured out how to sell, people have figured out how to operate, people figured out how to market, all those things, but really trying to put together the product council, the product roadmap, priorities, balance, beachheading, what comes first. That's, I think, one of the hardest things. And there isn't people out there that have been doing that for 30 years all the time. And a lot of this stuff is new. Right.
In our industry, there's also been plenty of failures around our industry, or these, when you get into an industry where you have a lot of, mom and pop, small lifestyle business legacy providers that have I kind of equate it to a cheap hotel buffet, it'll get you all the food you want. But what operators really want is a great Michelin star meal that's going to be perfectly designed and exactly how they want it to anticipate needs, et cetera. And I think that a lot of what's interesting for us as we think about the maturity, and as you talk about the peaks and valleys of different times of the business, is in the beginning, I'd say to a certain extent, the sales team is so ahead of product because we're roadmap selling. We're selling
Right.
the dream of what's going to be coming. And we got the mocks, the wireframes, and we're going to try to keep you going and put you on a pause until we have this thing and that. And then, so you have that kind of making sure you build that tight connection between sales, CS, and product. But then at one point, to your comment, it flips where now I'm like working hard to keep our AEs trained on all the new features that are coming out because they don't even know. And it's hard to keep them up to speed on all the amazing things the product team's developing. And so I think it has been a journey. We've been very fortunate to have such great people on go-to-market and product to have such a collaborative relationship where I think at a lot of companies it can be somewhat, oh God, what the hell is this person selling now? What, telling them it's gonna be ready in 2 weeks when we haven't even spec'd out a PRD.
Right.
We have a much tight, but we've gone, not to say we haven't gone through our issues over time, but that's been one of the interesting things for us to see that push and pull in the different areas of the business where we're roadmap selling now. We're not even selling all the products that we even have because we're so backloaded with all these other pieces of value. And we think of more during our offsite talked about kind of the valleys of death in the business, more on a revenue basis, on an ARR basis, where a percentage of startups that and tech companies that survive, you get from 2.5 million to 10 of ARR. Right? Where you go from 0.4% of startups to 0.1, continue to survive. And it's been some interesting presentations to where you start to get it at 50, 100 million of ARR. You start to get into this rarefied air of, I think at 100 is maybe 10,000 tech companies, private tech companies or private and public. Don't quote me on that number, but it's a very small number in the millions of actual startups out there. And that's how a little bit more we think about it holistically as an organization is how do we make it past this next valley of death? It's great that we got to this ARR figure.
Yeah.
But this is where a whole host of other startups have failed to get to that next level.
So in the midst of that chaos, right? How do you create focus with your team?
I'll say the thing that helped a ton is the kind of anchoring of our guiding principles. And we talked about this. I think it's the greatest thing on most of these podcasts I'll talk about. It's the greatest thing we've ever done. When I hear about culture things within companies, sometimes it's like this froofy bullshit and it's hard to almost resonate with it.
Right.
But I really, try to emphasize that everything that we've done has been anchored around our guiding principles. That is the universal alignment for us. And so as we don't set things in stone exclusively. We're like, this year, our goal is to do X. We tried the OKRs and the structures, and we do operate them within the company. But, this past offsite we had, our mission was 3, 2, 1, right? We have 3 products, we have 2 goals, and we have 1 mission, right? The goals of what we want to do as a company, the mission has stayed consistent always in the history of the business. And so we try not to be so myopic where we have a strategy and we can only go in this direction, or it's a single file line in a list of priorities. It's try to stay broad enough where we can keep ourselves honest with what our goals, OKRs, and kind of what we want to accomplish along the core product line that we have. But as long as we can anchor that 3, 2, 1 in a decision, it enables us to stay broad and to stay agile and to stay dynamic. Because I think the bigger you get and the more focused on either OKRs exclusively or keeping yourself accountable to one direction, you miss out on opportunities and you're not able to be as quick as you need to be to pivot to the right things at the right time. So that's how we've thought about it.
I totally agree. I love OKRs and I teach OKRs, but we do peak OKRs a little bit different. That allows that ability to be agile, to be flexible. How OKRs were written previously, it's challenging because they say that all the key results have to be metrics to show, towards that objective. That's just not the reality. What's most important is to figure out what do we want to do? How are we actually going to do that? And they miss that how, right? That's operating. We can define how we're going to do it, who's going to do it, when it's going to get done by, and then we run. And then each week we might have to pivot on that. We might have to change what we're doing. And I think that's what you're saying broad enough that we can be agile and move and be flexible. And I think that companies that tend not to succeed are being too rigid, or they're not keeping track of anything.
I think it's the how and the why also. So I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, 100%.
But I think that what I always try to get our team members to be thinking about is, how are we going to do this? And then ask yourself always, why are we doing the thing that we're doing?
Right.
Is it anchored back into our guiding principles? Is it anchored back into our 3, 2, 1 goals.
Yep.
Like, is it, if you can't justify the why, or you find yourself having to sell somebody on your why, then that backs into the fact that maybe the how is irrelevant and the other things aren't going
Right.
to really happen.
I think the why, you can do the why at many layers, but like the why is that North Star, that mission statement, that cause, that purpose, that belief, like that's why we're taking this journey in the first place, why we're climbing these mountains. And if that's not clear, then people get confused and they lose energy of what they're doing. And then we're not capitally efficient. But at each layer, asking that question, why, like we do that in OKRs when we go around the room and collect the top 5 objectives for the quarter. It's like, what do you think's number one of the top 5 objectives? And tell me why you think that would be important. And it gives them the opportunity to like evangelize for that objective that they 100%. Actually want to go for. And a lot of teams 100%. Miss that. I think a lot of teams miss that.
And I think the equally as important of the evangelism is the challenge, right? And the butting horns and butting heads. I think that's what I think we can work on, and things that I want to work on is, the joke I make is the only time somebody knows who I'm talking to when I go into a phone booth or when I'm in my office and, it's generally soundproof, is when I'm talking to my co-founder, because we will scream at each other and yell over nonsense, things that have no consequence to the business whatsoever. It's just an opinion that we have. And we will be screaming and fighting and all that. And we'll never end a conversation without saying, okay, love you, bye. We'll never... and I wish that, and it's hard to create a culture where people can argue with their managers, argue with directors, argue with C-levels, with founders, because they might think it's an indictment on them. They might think that there might be a repercussion of that challenge. But I think it is much more telling on the caliber, confidence, and talent of an employee, of a team member who is willing to challenge, because not for the sake of challenging almost exclusively, but I think that's an exercise in and of itself. But it's somebody who has a broader goal beyond themselves. They want the business to be successful. So whether, they're asking and challenging or somebody else's, the question needs to be asked, the challenge needs to be had in order for the business to get further. And so I try to tell our folks, like, separate your desire to challenge or disagree with you and more of what the business needs to be successful, because you might say the thing that triggers this entire conversation and decision that was transformative for us. But that, it's really easy to talk about the good things, really easy to get people excited and to evangelize. It's much harder for them to stick their neck out and challenge. And that's something that, we're trying to foster more and more here as much as we can.
Yeah. One of the things that we do every quarter is we have a quarterly survey that we do with the leadership team. And then we review that survey, and it pulls out questions, unpacks what are we doing great and what are our challenges, which are really the opportunities to learn and grow. If you don't unearth those, you're not going to progress, right? But I also love what you're saying, because like it is really important when I work with teams, I want an open, equal, transparent environment. I know there is a hierarchy and we're going to respect the hierarchy, but if this isn't a lab environment, if this isn't an environment where we can ask questions and go back and forth, we're not going to progress together. And I recognize this. Like, I grew up playing a lot of sports and I coach a lot of sports. The environment of, back in the 80s when I was skateboarding, when my friend would learn a trick and I'd be like, how'd you do that? And then he'd show me, and then I would do it. And then maybe I would do something different. And he'd be like, wait, how'd you do that? And it was just that like growing together, building. I have that in jiu-jitsu now as well. Like, we go in and we're like doing moves, and, someone submits and you're like, wait, how'd you do that? I thought you were going to do this. You go back and forth. But I think in companies, like, you need that lab environment to be open. Mm-hmm. You also have to recognize like when I should say something, how I'm saying something, stay on track, be respectful. I do have teams that get really animated and they get really, that's another reason why I'm a black belt in jiu-jitsu. I have to sometimes facilitate. I haven't choked anyone yet, but no, I think it's that lab environment is really important. Like, really, like, that lab environment's important. If people aren't open, you're never going to address the most important things that need to get fixed. And you're never be able to like really focus on the most important things.
100%. I think it is that most pure form of competition is wanting to compete. And then when you win, show everybody else how you won so they can win next, which is both, you want to make it even more competitive for yourself. So you're always playing against people that are better than you. But when you win, everybody wins. And the more everybody else wins, the more you win. And that's where that lab environment of competitive spirit, where people want to know, hey, you beat me today. How'd you do that? Because I want to beat you tomorrow. And you might beat me every day for the next 100 days, but I want to learn how you're doing it. So one day I'll get that, I'll get that upper hand. And there's actually something I heard over the weekend, last weekend. I was visiting some operators in Nashville, and somebody said in the leadership, and I could be butchering this, but it was something of like, loving to be the red belt, all about being the red belt, because the red belt is before you're the black belt. I believe, if that's correct, something along those lines.
Maybe in karate. I don't know. Maybe in karate.
I was taking karate. In karate, the red belt is before the black belt. So the story goes. And the most dangerous, this is what it was. The most dangerous people are the red belts, because they are working so hard to be the black belt. And that is and so they are killing themselves to become the black belt, training, all of that. And so you want to be the red belt. You want to be the person that is killing yourself in training and working so hard to get to that next level, and always keep that kind of mindset. And I love that quote and that storyline. So
well, it's true. I mean, I just actually came from jiu-jitsu, and in class, a brown belt was visiting, and I could feel him just watching me, because it's like a lion. He's like, do I get to train with that guy today? I want to beat him because I want my black belt. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And that's who you want around the table. Those are the people that are going to challenge, are going to hurt, who are going to push, because they understand there's more to go. And I think in the world of startups, celebrating the wins that you got to that next chapter, while just realizing, oh my God, this next one's even harder and bigger. And getting people that are as motivated to succeed as they are to succeed again and to push through that challenge is a huge part of culture, a huge part of what it takes to, and the kind of way I would want our customers to see our company. And I think that's the other element when you're working with SMBs, tying it back to that, where I want them to feel that every team member they ever engage with, ever see at a conference, at an event, is an exact representation of our culture holistically. And that's huge diversity in our team, in our culture, in our thinking, and one of our guiding principles. But no matter who you are, where you come from, what you do, what you look like, anything like that, are with the right values and the kind of right way of going about work, they really can become the greatest representation of our business, across the board always.
I think the best talent always wants to work with the best talent. And I'd like to say everybody wants to work with the best talent, but not everybody does. I mean, that's the reality. Some of the non-high performing people don't want to work with other high performing people because they don't want to have to work that hard. They're not that motivated. But as you create an environment of high talent people, it attracts more high talent people. It keeps more high talent people. You guys have had a crazy successful keeping your people, right?
Yeah, I think our retention rate is something in 95, 97% of employee. We really, really don't lose folks.
What do you think that is?
It's funny because I remember early days, somebody wrote in their performance review somewhere of just like, I love it here so much, just please don't fire me. There's something like that. It was like a funny, and I remember reading that and being like, and I talked to, I think our director of operations at the time. It's like, what the hell are we doing? I don't know what we're doing that's making people feel this way. And I think over time it's set in more, which is, and I talked to so many early stage founders also, and it's so interesting how different our culture and way of thinking is than maybe the average, but it feels very innate to every single person here, because none of us are trying to be anything other than ourselves. I think the guiding principles first anchor everything. Outside of like HR issues, it's nearly impossible to get fired at Sense if you embody our guiding principles. Every single time somebody has underperformed their role while embodying our guiding principles, they haven't been terminated. They've been moved to another department. And every single time that has happened, they have been the leader in that department. We had an account executive who was a terrible account executive, and he knows who he is if he listens to this. And after 3 months, instead of terminating him because his manager said, this guy loves the industry, loves the customers, he's putting in all the work, he just can't close to save his life. We moved him to an SDR. Every single month for the last 2 years, he has set the record with SDRs. Our director of operations, who was, working with customers, CS, working across the board, was really struggling in that role. Moved her to director of product operations, one of the single highest performing employees I've ever worked with in general, who actually just celebrated her 4 years at Sense this week. So the guiding principles have been an anchor. And I think the other side of it is I tell everybody to have a very selfish environment here. And what that means is do things you like. Do you like certain snacks? Do you like certain music? What do you like? And enforce that here instead of trying to get everybody to like the things that the company is about. I don't want to make people come to an office that I don't love and enjoy and has the knickknacks and the vibes and everything that is, generally fun. And I think that's more the way to look at it. I think you can be really clinical over your culture, or you can be a human being and just talk about what's fun and, and what gets people excited and together. And I think we've taken a very simple approach anchored in our guiding principles and anchored in what the hell do you like and makes you happy, and just try to do those things.
Right.
I wish I could give you some really sophisticated clinical approach.
So how did you guys build the guiding principles? What was the process?
So, I learned them from one of our newest board members, the co-founder CEO of Built Technologies, Chase Gilbert. They've done amazing work, and it was an inspiration to see what they had created. We thought of the guiding principles first, in the exercise I took in thinking about them at a high level before presenting the concept to the team it's very difficult for me to separate. I separate my work life and my personal life completely. But from a personality standpoint, is kind of the same thing. My friends in high school and college and in the city, anywhere, would say I'm pretty much the exact same guy to a certain extent. And so to me, the guiding principles were all about, these are things that in your, you have to extrapolate some things like act like an owner, maybe, and customer obsessed. And our guiding principles is maybe not a one-to-one in your personal life, but, great responsibility, attitude over everything, customer obsessed, work fast, work smart, act like an owner, stay curious, run through walls, self-awareness, diversity, and team culture and thought. Those are our guiding principles. And I could take each one of those and apply them directly to a core value I have in my life. And so that was the first exercise, was a core value that you have at work that doesn't align with a core value you resonate with as a person is not sustainable. Right. Because these need to be qualities we identify during the hiring process. And when I interview somebody, I'm looking in our whole hiring manager and all the different interviewers that go through a process, they're all looking for 1 to 2 guiding principles. Because in a 30-minute interview, you can't really identify more than that.
Right. Yeah.
And so if I go in an interview, I want to see, does somebody have great responsibility? They feel the weight of the responsibility in the work they're doing, both for the customers and their coworkers. And they want to have this, what we call a 1-to-1 say and do ratio. You say one thing, you do it. Don't say 2 things and do one. And you don't have to do 2. You don't have to do 2 things if you said one thing. Have a 1-to-1 say and do ratio and feel the weight and responsibility of what you have to do every day to support our business owners and our employees. Identify that. And is somebody act like an owner? Do they understand what it means to be a business owner, to be a shareholder in sense? And do they think like an investor, think like an operator? You can take those 2 things in a relationship you have with your partner. You understand the responsibility when you are engaged in a partnership with anybody, and you got to think about that in your activities. So those are kind of examples of that. And then it was bringing these high level values to our team, to our leadership team at the time, very, very small, and saying, let's list out 20 and let's try to whittle it down as much as we can until we get to 10 that we would bleed for. That these are so core to who we are as people and as coworkers, that, this should carry the stand the test of time. And we have never once thought about needing to revise or revisit because they are as standalone, I think, valuable than anything else we've done from a culture perspective.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. I really boiled down 5 core behaviors of high performing teams, looking across sports and any sort of team that's high performing. I was able to really define those 5 core behaviors that I write about in the book. But the first one is symbiosis. And in order to get symbiosis and an organisms working together, united, you have to do what you did, right? Like you have to have that. And I think a lot of people are on a spectrum of core behaviors, that's just fluff. Core behavior is super important, but I think you guys went to that next level. And I think that's the most important. It's like, how do we actually use these? How do we actually see these? How do we reward these? And that's actually makes it practical. But yeah, out of my 5 behaviors of high performing teams, like the first one, S, is symbiosis. And I think you guys just nailed that one. Like you hit it out of the park.
Yeah, and look, it also makes it more fun. I always tell people that like the startup stuff, especially working with small business owners, this shit's hard. It's not worth it for like a hope and a whim that you make a bunch of money at the end of it.
Right.
It's not worth, that is not worth it. There's other, just work somewhere for 40 years, get the gold watch and be a company person. You know, if that's your outcome of just like stability and a long-term gain of some sort, if you don't enjoy it and you don't understand and appreciate the uniqueness of the opportunity you have every day, that's where I think the guiding principles, the culture, the product, the getting deep with our relationship with customers, all of that is a monetary benefit to the business. They are strong, sound business decisions. They also make the pain and suffering more palatable. And I think that's the other thing I tell our team. I tell, first-time founders, any of my founder friends of, how have we raised, close to $80 million in, one of the best markets and one of the worst markets in a decade? How have we bought companies and done these things that have been and grown in a space that's never had a tech company in it the way we exist? How have we done that? And a lot of it is the mix of the guiding principles and the mix of being able to endure immense suffering and pain. And that is, Jensen from NVIDIA, did this talk to Stanford, I think Stanford Business School students of, what does he wish for them in their careers is immense suffering and pain, because that's actually what enables you to persevere through the, if you take two great people, the one that can endure the most pain and continue to work and give are the ones that are generally going to go further. Yeah. And
it's growth. That's the only path to growth and learning.
And if you're not having fun,
then it's not worth it.
And it's really hard to get punched in the face every day.
Right.
It's just
right.
really hard.
Right. Oh, 100%. 100%. So you talked about, you guys raised what, 80 some million dollars?
Like 77.5 in equity. Yeah.
All right. Close enough. Let's talk about two things. One, you raised a lot of money and you did hardware. And I would guess at the early stages, people were probably really asking about your TAM. Like how big is this? And you're doing hardware? Like those are a couple quick off the top of my head, like must have been some challenges to deal with.
Yeah, look, I always say to folks is it sounds like a big number. Like we never look at the fundraise amount as a vanity metric of success, but it was an indicator of, I think, what was needed to get to the place of where we're at and really commit ourselves to this industry and build trust with our operators and knowing we're going to be here both for the long haul, but follow through on our mission as kind of centralized platform. But look, I mean, verticalized software has become this beautiful renaissance happening in the last couple of years. Definitely kind of thinking about the business early days, it did not have the same sexiness that it does now, where it seems like every industry now has a verticalized software at least play. But yeah, our investor from Bessemer said early on, if an investor is digging really deep on TAM in a doubtful way, not in an interest to understand way, don't waste your time, because that's not a negative to the investor in any way. It's not an arrogance. It's more of like, some people are going to see an opportunity of owning a vertical from a quality of product perspective and being able to really be a market leader. And some are going to say it's going to be a hard road and we can't really underwrite, or, and I get that. Not, everybody might want a TAM of $1 trillion and go after, payments, broad payments or AI and right. And all those things. But I think, and it's harder to take the right bet on the right horse in vertical SaaS, because in a smaller niche, you got to win. And, I think our approach was, there's nearly every other size of vertical. I mean, you can strip out garment care and repair to $60 billion in GMV. There's plenty of market size in this space without question. Yep. Our ambition was not just to build a laundromat operating system, but really the nucleus of infrastructure in terms of operating platform, payments, software, hardware for garment care and repair businesses, laundromats, dry cleaners, alterations, tailors, industrial cleaning, online ordering and delivery, et cetera. So the TAM from our perspective was huge enough, but it was also messaging that there's a real opportunity to take advantage of the things in vertical SaaS that are unique. Super high market penetration, really high retention if you build the right product, the right relationship with customers and invest in support, out of market attachment rates to the new products that you deploy. And, I think the ability to really be a category owner, a category leader, and not just one of the many kind of slow growing kind of lifestyle businesses. And so that, I think, was part of our, an investor could look at us and say, we're investing in the industry of garment care because we know Sense is going to win it. It wasn't that we're going to invest in one of the top garment care softwares, because that was
Right.
never our goal, never our ambition, never our play. And we took a real big swing. It's a lot of money. We're sitting behind a lot of pref. We want to have a big outcome. We took a big swing, and so far it's paying off, but a lot of no's.
Well, you're in one of 10 laundromats, right, across the U.S.
1 in 10 laundromats in the U.S. have at least one of our products now. But that was not without an extraordinary amount of no's from investors, and rightfully so, because our business has looked a lot of different ways at a lot of different people. But we always had the conviction it would look like it is today. It just, again, a non-linear path to get there.
Well, you're a second-time founder, and I would guess you didn't learn everything you needed to learn in that first go-around, right?
That would be, I certainly learned a lot of things not to do in the first go-around.
Right.
Definitely not everything not to do, but definitely learned a lot of those.
Yeah. This time around, like, what has been one of the hardest things that you had to tackle?
Interesting. I think I've had a lot more introspection on personal development. I've had some great analogies of an executive coach that I have, that, when you're playing basketball in high school and you're great at basketball in high school, you can, you train, you work hard, but you got this kind of innate ability, so you can kind of play well. And you go to college and you have the innate ability, and a lot of people have an innate ability. You work hard and you're, playing well. Then you go to the NBA and you're like, holy crap. At every stage, you're at a different caliber of people around you, because everybody's got the same insane work ethic and everybody has the insane innate ability and talent. And so what are you going to do to make yourself constantly better? And not from a competition standpoint, but to elevate to the occasion. And I think the thing that I've tried to spend the most time on, as personally outside of work, is, which I didn't do as much in my first company, is more, how do I make myself better before I need to have become better? Before we've gotten to that next stage, I want to make sure that I can be up to the task, that people can look at me with confidence at the board level or in the company. Because a lot of founders, you get thrust into positions you haven't been in before at different levels and different scales. If you've never run $1 billion company and you run $1 billion company, I don't care if you sold one for 100 million, it's not $1 billion, and you're going to learn new things and there are going to be more challenges. And so taking more effort for myself and our other leaders to focus on that personal development de-risks the outcome, because I think we're getting to the point now in the business where, macroeconomic environment doesn't impact the laundry business. Pandemics don't really impact the laundry business. A lot of things don't impact our ability to win. A lot of our risk is in our own ability to execute on our plan and our goals. And so focusing on how we can make ourselves better through learning from other people constantly, advisory boards, executive coaching, peer mentorship, challenging, fighting, arguing, etc. That has been much more of a concerted effort that we've, as a company, and then myself personally, have taken on, from Series A to Series B, which I think sets us up for a real unique ability to scale in a very lean way going forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I usually never bring up the 5 behaviors, but you keep on nailing them, and it's hard not just to ignore it. But symbiosis, communication, alignment, learning is such an important one. And then the last one's empowerment, which makes the word scale. Right. But the learning
100%.
thing is so important. Like, when you hire people that are hungry to learn, they're hungry, they're motivated, they're going to work for you, they're going to figure it out. If they don't know how to do it, they're going to find a way to find it. But I also find that with a lot of leadership teams that I work with too, like, if they're not constant learners, they're not going to be able to keep scaling with the company as the company scales. You have to dig in and really put in the work.
100%. And I've had moments where I think man, we need to elevate. We need to get better. Well, we are here. We need to get here as a team, as a leadership team, whatever it is. And I vocalize that to our team. And then I've taken a step back and I'm like, everybody from a execution perspective of their day to day, crushing it. And if I want people to elevate, you also, I think, have the responsibility as a company to put people in a position to be able to learn. If you have all the ambition and hunger to learn, but you don't invest in their ability to do so, then what are you doing? And that has been part of, I think, the learning for myself is, you can't say, man, we want better people, great resumes, we want people to get better all the time. But in reality, we hold a lot of those keys where, do you give somebody the ability to think strategically for 10 minutes? Do you give people the ability to actually step outside of the day-to-day and look a little bit more here than just here? And it doesn't take away from the fact that, hey, at the end of the day, we've only got 80 or so people. I need everybody executing on day-to-day. But I think investing in people and making sure that they know it's okay to think broadly as long as we continue to execute, head in the clouds, feet on the ground to a certain extent, from how do you unlock it? And I think a lot of what my job is today, outside of all the other things I actually do, but it's something my co-founder and I talk about all the time. It's unlocking and unblocking of our team.
Yep.
Because I know that the people here that match our guiding principles are true executors and have limitless potential. And then it's on us to a certain extent, because we know they have the drive to unlock and unblock their ability to actually learn. And that's been something that we've been navigating and figuring out what the best strategy there is going to be.
Yeah. I love that. I think about that all the time. And that was kind of the thesis behind the work that I've done, is like, how do I allow teams to execute? Because everybody says it all the time. Execution is the most important thing. Execute, execute, execute. But there was no blueprint for that. And, listening to your stories, every time we've talked, I see that you guys are doing the things to unlock and block teams to execute. You guys have just done it. It's awesome. All right. Before I give you the last question, I have one last question for you. I'm going to let you ask me a question because I've been drilling you nonstop with stuff, and you've been very nice about it. And then I'm going to ask you the most important question of your life. So you have to prepare for that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a big one.
Well,
it's a big one.
Yeah. We got a couple to-dos coming up. All right.
So go ahead and ask me a question.
Oh, well, let me pick. I actually thought of a couple as we were going around it. It's more of a, can I ask two? It's a two-parter.
Okay.
I'm going to ask two-parter. Do you think that happiness is a choice in people? I'll start with that.
100%.
And if it's a choice and it is cultivated, what do you think the steps that you do in working with teams and things like that you try to unlock the pure essence of happiness outside of execution and corporate bullshit? How do you think about that in a corporate environment?
Well, I think it's setting the situation, setting the table for the team to talk about those things. And I think at the end of the day, we all want to be successful. One of the things I love about venture-backed teams, when I jumped into them and played a variety of roles before I started Collective Genius, is that we're all in it together, right? Most of the employees have some sort of equity. So we're all in this together. And I actually have a couple of ESOPs that I do sessions with Pete too. And I love the fact that they're all owners, right? I love the idea of that we're all working together for a goal together. And I think there's some innate thing about being a part of a real team that makes people happy. I think connection makes people happy. And so when I bring teams together and we set the stage for their annual session or quarterly session, or teach them how to do a weekly meeting, it's really to create that symbiosis again, like I was talking about. It's really to connect and integrate together and succeed together. And I think that creates happiness. I think at the end of the day, working together as part of a team is more enjoyable than it is to succeed alone. And we know in teams like what you're doing and what you've done, other growth companies like this, it takes everybody to do this. And then some of the unlocking to get to that execution and why OKR is done the right way is that everything's so cross-functional in these teams because there's no blueprint. And so we're all working together to succeed. A lot of the objectives might be product and sales together, or product and engineering, or maybe even finance and sales, trying to accomplish something together. Success is when we can do that together. And that's what makes people happy. And so for me to unlock them is to create that symbiosis through communication, to create that alignment, to help them dig in and learn, but then create that empowerment to let the teams just run and do it and not get in their way.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in the world. I mean, Tony Hsieh's book, Delivering Happiness, and the concept of how powerful that is in the workplace, I think is a lot of time lost in the world of execution and all the kind of military corporate terms and all the things, the intensity of it, which look, I like, and I like to rally it up and be intense in that way. But I think sometimes it's lost of just hey, are you happy? What makes you happy? And that's part of the interview process. What are the things that you do outside of work that make you happy? because that is the most productive workers are the ones that are the happiest ones in their life because they can just give more of themselves and feel fulfilled. And I'm always curious on how people think about that.
Yeah, I think Tony Hsieh was a great guy. Like I went through a tour through their facility one day, and I came up and there he was sitting in his cubicle in the center of everything. And I'm like, man, I'm kind of a fanboy. I love, business books and stuff. I love what you wrote. I love the culture thing that you did. Took a picture with him, and then we kept on walking, and some other people took pictures, and they kept on walking. And someone looks at me and is like, who was that we just took a picture with? And I was like, well, God. That's Tony, like that, the guy that created this whole thing. Right. And he's like, wait, but he was sitting in that cubicle, like next to everybody else in their cubicles. I was like, exactly. Like that was part of what he did and part of, his thing, right? Is to be in the middle of it, which I think is another thing that a lot of people miss. As a CEO and founder, you're always going to be in the middle of your business. You're always going to be the spoke. Everybody's your boss. And you can't just elevate and delegate and, sit in, this ivory tower and everybody do it. Like if you're in it, especially if you raise money, you're in it till the end. Right.
100%. You don't want to, and I don't want to ask people to do a job I'm not willing to do either. And I think that's why, like, my Slack status is always, or my about me is like, you're a cheerleader, which is like, I work as much for you because if I can help you be the best version and help you get to where you want to be, then that's going to elevate and get and make the company great. But yeah, I couldn't agree more, to the
and that's success for you,
story.
Right?
100%.
Yeah. All right. Here's the final question. I'm glad you're sitting down because this is going to be tough. It's actually more of a scenario. So this is the scenario. Okay. You're trapped on a desert island.
Okay.
For the rest of your life. You have food and water, and let's just say you even have healthcare. So you're totally taken care of.
Totally fine.
Right? Okay. The only thing you don't have is you have absolutely no entertainment at all. However, luckily for you, an old 80s boombox drifts ashore with unlimited batteries. But you can only bring one album to listen to for the rest of your life. Wow. What album are you going to bring?
Oh, that is tough. Okay,
I warned you. So I mean,
and everything. I'm my age now.
You can actually any genre, any decade, any time. Yeah, one album.
Okay, any genre. It's so tough. I'll tell you my logic of going through it. My logic of going through it is I don't need like a story kind of album. A lot of rap albums are telling a story along the way to a certain extent. I would want something where if I've got nothing else, no stimulus of just that is a positive feeling, vibe, etc. that would always, that I could not smile at even if I heard it 1,000 times. And it would probably be the song that was actually, before we had Zoom, I used a company called Uber Conference for my last company.
Oh, yeah.
And I could customize my hold music. And my customized hold music was Night Fever by the Bee Gees.
Oh,
so probably just the biggest Bee Gees album with the most possible songs I could get is something that would, Bee Gees and Earth, Wind and Fire is, I can't not have a good time. I don't care if I become delirious, if I'm sick, if I'm anything, there's just no way I'm not having a great time listening to that.
Yeah.
I'll never not be in the mood for the Bee Gees. So I think that would probably be my answer.
That's awesome. That's the first time I got a Bee Gees answer.
You got it. The first time you got a Bee Gees?
Yeah. But I grew up listening. My parents had a Bee Gees 8-track. I remember we had a big boat and they had an 8-track on the boat and they'd play the Bee Gees. You can't. Why aren't people sampling the Bee Gees? That's what I keep on thinking. I think there's a whole genre out there that could be sampling music from that era. That'd be really cool.
That's what, if I had a record of the Bee Gees, then I would just scratch the record and then I'd make my own Bee Gees samples and that'd be enough for me.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it'd probably be
final answer, the Bee Gees. That's great. All right, Alex, thanks so much for joining me on the show. This was a great talk. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for having me, and really, really fun chatting with you, and looking forward to staying in touch and doing this again soon.